Öncelikle öğle antrenmanına hoş geldiniz. Bugün Mark Stephens'ın NetBeans'ten Writing Better Code isimli seminerine başlıyoruz.
Okay, my name is Mark Stevens. As you will gather, I'm English. I appreciate you listening to me in English, so if I talk too fast because I get quite excited, please sort of wave at me and tell me. So, today I'm going to talk about writing better code with NetBeans, and I'm also going to give you a second talk afterwards, so there's going to be two talks for the price of one. So let's kick off. Let me introduce myself briefly first. As you can see, I am wearing a NetBeans t-shirt. I am a member of the NetBeans community, and I'm going to tell you about why I'm so enthusiastic about NetBeans. That is how I like to see myself. Sadly, you can't, can you see the picture? Yeah. Sadly, most of my friends and my family don't see me that way. I am from the UK, where I have my own business. I have 7 people working for me. I've worked for large and small companies. I have been using Java since 1997, so I was very, very young when I started. And I have used all sorts of tools for Java, some of which you won't have ever heard of. And I can tell you, you are really lucky these days. When I started writing Java, I had to pay 1,000 Turkish liras for a fairly horrible piece of tool. And at the moment, we're arguing about which free tool has the best features for us. So we are really, really lucky in 2015. For my work machine, I have a Mac Pro. I have a full copy of IDEA 15 installed on it, and I run NetBeans 8.1. It also has a beautiful screenshot of St. Sophia. I'm a big fan of Istanbul, so thank you very much for inviting me. I will tell you why I use IDEA about 10% of the time and why I use NetBeans about 90% of the time in my talk. I have been a speaker at lots of events, and Oracle nicely asked me if I wanted to be on the NetBeans Dream Team. I don't actually work for Oracle. I don't get paid by Oracle. I'd like to be paid some money by Oracle, but I think the chances of that are pretty low. I work with PDF, HTML5. My commercial product, which I started writing in 1999 and thought would take 3 years, is a PDF library. We're still going on it. We still haven't finished it. We did have a license it to Adobe, and that's our claim to fame, is we sold a PDF library to the people who invented it. For my day job, I work on the 2 products, and I also convert PDF to HTML5. So I also have a degree in medieval history. So I arrived 2 days early, and I've had a fantastic time climbing the walls, going around the museums and the mosques. So anytime you want me to come to a talk, I'm always happy. So please ask me about NetBeans, Java, HTML5, SVG, PDF, or anything which happened before 1500 AD. I'm pretty hot on that. My talk is going to cover the following areas. I'm going to tell you that NetBeans is a tool for lots of languages. I'm going to show you how it offers a huge amount of built-in functionality. I'm going to talk about debugging code. Not that we ever have bugs in any of our code. I'm going to talk about how you can use NetBeans to test the code. Why do testing yourself when you can get the code to do it automatically? I'm going to talk about how you can write better code. I'm going to talk about the plugin manager. I'm going to talk about code quality. And I'm going to show you lots of cat pictures. So, first of all, let's talk about what's better code. And I've written a couple of ideas here, and we may think about this during the talk as to what makes better code. Is it faster to write? Faster to run? Less buggy, whatever buggy means? Looks like Mark Reinhold wrote it. Makes sense to a 7-year-old. Is easy to maintain. More fun to write. Shorter, longer, simpler, or maybe it's a combination of all of it. Maybe it's one of those things we look at it and we can't come up with an exact definition, but we think some code is better than others. So how can we create better code, and how does NetBeans help us to do it? Before diving into NetBeans, and most of the slides are just to remind me not to forget things in my enthusiasm, I want to talk about context. NetBeans is context sensitive, so if you select a file, the operation will run on the file. If you select a directory or a project, the operation will run on the project. If you choose to push from version control, it'll push whatever you've selected. That's a small tip, because when I started getting into coding, I kept finding I was forgetting to commit things. So it is context sensitive, and I'll show you some of that later. Okay, so let's talk about the NetBeans family. If you go to the NetBeans website, you will see something like this. The current version of NetBeans, which is really shiny and new and only came out in November, is NetBeans 8.1. And NetBeans is very modular. It started off as a Java IDE, and now, as you can see, it has different flavors of Java. So if you want to write Java for the desktop, you can. If you want to write Java for EU, you can. If you want to write HTML5 and JavaScript, it does that as well. And we'll be showing you some of the features there. If you want to do PHP, it does that. Or if you want the complete package, it does that. NetBeans is really modular, so it's really easy to add things, remove things, and put them in. You can even have things that aren't on the list. So if you want to write for Android code, obviously Oracle wouldn't mention the word Android on its website, but if you want to write Android code, NetBeans has a really cool Android plugin, so you can install that, write code. You can even get plugins for languages I've never even heard of and I don't understand, but apparently they're quite good from the people who know. NetBeans is also not just an IDE, but it's also a complete software development kit. It's a tool that allows you to generate complete resources to ship, and it's also a platform. So when I started coding, I used to have to write stuff in Swing, and I'd have to build my own Windows system on my own pop-ups, and I'd have to manually code it. NetBeans lets you do all of that now. You can make use of NetBeans either by extending NetBeans, which is a plugin, or you can create your own applications. And the IDE completely disappears, and you just have an application which takes you a fraction of the time to write because you're using all of the code in NetBeans. And if you're worried that that means you've got to ship the IDE, NetBeans is really smart. So it will look at which bits you are using, and it will bundle those with your application. And quite often you will find A, the code's better than you could have written, certainly that I could have written. B, it's been heavily tested because it's been running in NetBeans for many years. And also, it's probably actually smaller. So NetBeans is a great tool for taking advantage of everyone else's hard work and taking the credit yourself to build rich client applications really quickly. Let's talk about NetBeans projects. And again, you can have different languages. And let's get into NetBeans. Let's get out of a slide and show you NetBeans. So this is a vanilla project. This is a vanilla copy of NetBeans. And one of my favorite features of NetBeans is that it works, as we say, out of the box. You just install it on the machine. Most things you need are there. You can find things and add them in quickly. So I'm going to have great confidence now because I haven't seen this copy of NetBeans before. So let's dive in and see if I'm going to be proved right. So when we have NetBeans, we can have different types of projects. And again, we can have Java projects. And again, NetBeans comes with multiple versions of the projects. We can have JavaFX projects. So we can have all of these. We can also have HTML5. And the latest versions of NetBeans have added huge amounts of JavaScript functionality. So you can have your own Node application, JavaScript library. You can build a Cordova application. And there are also really nice samples that I'm going to show you shortly. You can also build a Maven application. A lot of people have switched to NetBeans because it offers outstanding Maven support. There's no local files. If you have a Maven file in a directory, NetBeans regards that as a NetBeans Maven project. So you can have generic projects. NetBeans will work perfectly with Maven. You can also have PHP, Groovy, C++. You can build applications using NetBeans, as we said, and we can have some examples. So we'll come to that shortly. Let's go back to the slides. Okay, you can also, as I said, have an Android plugin, and I'll talk about the plugin very briefly. Okay, you can live inside NetBeans. One of the biggest problems I find is just the numbers of distractions that go on. So I get in the morning, I get everything set up, and then I fire up NetBeans in full screen mode. And NetBeans has everything I need to get on with the development. So it has a nice view here. It also has, let's create a project just so you can see it. I'm going to skip ahead. Just within NetBeans, again, we have lots of worked examples. So this is one I'm going to use later. I'm going to use that now to bring up the window. And NetBeans will fire up. And it's set up to Java 8, excellent. And now we have a window with the projects. We can add additional windows to it. So we can have a files view. We can have a Java-orientated project view. We can have a services view. We can also, on Windows, have other windows as well. So we can have, and these are all context sensitive, as I mentioned earlier. So if I select the projects and I go to my Java class in source packages, you will see, hopefully, that the windows will all change. So the Navigator has now picked up the structure of the file, and I can now see the file. And all of these windows can be moved around, they can be shifted, they can be closed. If you get in a mess, you can go to Window and choose Reset. And that will put them all back to the default value. You also have this rather nice feature of a start page, which allows me to list my current projects, but it also takes me to all the documentation, so I never actually have to leave NetBeans to get to any documentation. It also allows me to see what's going on, and we have internet connection. I can catch up with all of the latest posts. So any new tutorials we posted here, and any blog articles that are related to NetBeans will be posted here. NetBeans has a tremendous community behind it, and there's an awful lot of people writing things about NetBeans, what they're doing with NetBeans, how they're using NetBeans, and you'll see some of it turning up there. You can also have a, just to complete the list, we can have a Bash IDE, so we can have a terminal session. So I've got terminal down there, and I can also access services. So I can access Maven repositories, I can access Hudson, I can access Derby, just about anything can plug into NetBeans. So I never actually have to leave NetBeans in order to do my work. It works really nicely. And there are some windows I just haven't even shown you yet. There's an action window, there's a favorites window, so you can have bookmarks as well, you can have favorite files, so the key files are easy to locate. And NetBeans makes that all really easy to find. So let's go back to our slide. The services window also, if you're running something like WebSphere or Glassfish, you can either run it locally within NetBeans or you can plug into an external one. So NetBeans is very, very flexible. And it also means that you can go full screen in NetBeans and get really down to code, get into the zone, as they say. Okay, so one of my favorite features on NetBeans, obviously this is a quote from me and not Pablo Picasso, is that it has lots of examples built into it. And what's nice about the examples is that they are not so simple that you think that it's a bit obvious, really, but they are not so complicated that you can't figure them out. So let's look at this example here. So I have the fireworks project, and this class here is 325 lines of code. I'm going to clean and build it, and it's a small, complete application. So one of the first things I do if I want to learn a new technology, and I'm just starting to pick up Angular at the moment, so I go into the NetBeans examples, is rather than try and work it out from scratch, I can actually go in and I can fire up a little example, and it will do something. And this is some fireworks over San Francisco. So as I say, it's small enough that you can make sense of it, read it, take it apart, and it is large enough that it actually makes use to you. And I don't know if you can read that code, but I have a small confession to make. So please, I don't want this to leave this room, so nobody's to mention this. But this is a JavaFX application. And so you can see it has it extends application at the top. Just there. And I didn't actually know until I was preparing a talk on using this, that actually you don't have to have a main method inside a JavaFX application. You just have to have a launch method. You only have to have a main method for compatibility. So please keep that to yourself and don't tell anyone. I don't want that to leave this room, please. Oh yes, you can also have comments and histories on the classes. So let's just look at that quickly. So when I have any class, I can see the source code. I can also see the history of it. And every time I make any changes, the history will be recorded there. And I can also edit and type in things. One of the things I find that's great in NetBeans is you feel people who developed it actually used the tool, because the number of times you just think it would be really cool if you could do something like this. So I was flying out on Thursday to visit your beautiful city and doing some code on the plane, as one does. And I wanted to add a Java class. And I thought it would be really, let's find it. No, I'm going to create a directory. So I wanted to create some multiple directories. So what I did was I went to here, and I wanted to create a folder, and I actually had to create multiple levels. So I thought to myself, let's try A/B/C/D and see what NetBeans does. And A/B/C/D, and it gives me multiple levels, which is really nice. Just a bit annoying because I've been creating them manually for a long time since then. So let's go back to the topic. Okay, so you've written some code, or you're trying to understand some code, and it would be really nice if we could stop in the middle of the code and see what's going on. So let's have a look at our JavaFX application. and see that in action. So here we have the application, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a breakpoint. And the breakpoint facilities are very, very sophisticated. I can have conditional breakpoints. I just want a simple breakpoint because I want to look at this code and I want to see what's going on. It might be because I'm trying to understand it, or it might be because the code doesn't quite do what I'd expected it to. So let's put a breakpoint here. So this is really, really complicated, so I need you to watch this carefully. Will be questions at the end, and I do have some rather nice activities for the 3 questions that people ask at the end. So let's put a breakpoint there. You can now see it's told me there's a breakpoint. There's a menu there which allows me to see breakpoints, toggle them, and also I can actually bring up a breakpoint window where I can see all the breakpoints. So what I'm now going to do, I've now switched it off, there, is I'm going to run debug mode. Then go to here, and again, NetBeans has loads of little toolbar icons, and I'm going to run this code. So let's run it from the. Okay, and NetBeans has now run, and there's no fireworks because it's stopped. And it's stopped there. And you'll notice we now have a debugging window, and I can actually see the stack trace here. So if I wanted to find out who's calling this method, I can actually see exactly how it's reached this class from the stack methods here and step back through it. What you'll also see is that the toolbar at the top has changed, and this toolbar is totally configurable. So the first thing I would do if this was my machine is I would add all of my toolbar shortcuts for version control. So here you can see that we have switch some off and you can switch some on. So that's switching off. Take quick search out the way. Let's put debug. Okay, so we now have our options here. And again, if you don't know what they do, you can move the mouse over it and it tells you, and there's a keyboard shortcut. So let's step over to the next one. And what I can now do is I can see the values of those. If I want to change the value and it's a number, an int, or a boolean, I can even type in that box and edit it. If it's a complex object, I can't do that. I can set conditional assemblies. I can scroll down. I can see what the values are. I can also, which is quite nice, I now want to go to that point in the code. So I'm going to move my cursor there, and I'm going to click scroll down to cursor. And that will now execute to there. And I can also carry on. I can carry on running. I can set additional breakpoints. So that makes it very, very easy. And let's finish running it. So it'll now run until hit the breakpoint again, so let's take the breakpoint off. And let's carry on running it. And there we are. So I've barely scratched the debug capabilities of NetBeans, but what I like is the way there's some very simple ones built in for very quick work, and there's some very sophisticated ones if you really need to drill down to see what's going on. And that allows you to debug your code within NetBeans. I should also mention that I'm showing you this in Java. Because NetBeans has other languages, you also have the same type of debugging capabilities in your HTML, your JavaScript, your C, and just about anything else you can run on NetBeans. And you can use the same techniques in all of them. So it's a nice one tool to solve all coding problems. Okay, version control. And I've mentioned the toolbar is configurable. One of the main reasons that people switch to NetBeans is because they find that they have support for all of these different versions. So trying to locate it. On my machine, they're all, there they are. So we got Git, we got Mercurial, we got Subversion. We have a local history on the machine. We also have the ability to have a task history on the machine. And the strange thing about NetBeans is that people just fire it up and they get on with their work. And then the Eclipse team come in and they say, we're having terrible problems getting this thing working. And you just look at them and go, I don't understand what the problem is. NetBeans has, of all the tools I've used, it has the best out-of-the-box support, certainly for Mercurial. Of the Git work I've done, definitely for that, definitely for Subversion. And as NetBeans developers like to say, it just works. It's not a problem for us. If you have a problem with it, then you need to use NetBeans. I still find on IDEA, I still switch the command line. If I'm doing work on IDEA, I still end up jumping in the command line and running HG or Git commands on the command line. NetBeans also has quite a few synthetic commands built in, so like the fetch commands available automatically off the toolbar. So you don't actually have to do this jumping into the shell just to commit the code. So that's version control. Okay, testing your code. We all do test our code, is that right? Excellent. So one of the most tedious things about testing code is obviously writing all those tests and all that boilerplate. So wouldn't it be nice if what I could do is tell NetBeans that I want a test directory, and what I want to do is I want to be able to go to any class. So let's choose that class. I want to be able to say to NetBeans, I would like a test. And NetBeans will say, okay, do you want to use JUnit or testng? Let's use JUnit. Do you want, which methods would you like tests written for? What boilerplate code would you like written? And I could just click the button and I would find a test class appear. And what would also be really nice is if NetBeans looked at the public methods and said, I can more or less guess what this does. So let's create a test. Let's automatically set it up so that it fails. And then you guys can take this code and you can turn it into exactly the sort of tests you want. But all of this hassle of writing all of these teardown and setup methods, I'll take care of that for you. Anyway, that's what I'd really like to see in an IDE. And as you can see, it's present in NetBeans. And these tests also don't rely on NetBeans, so you can run them as part of your continuous integration. When we do our development IDRSolutions, we have all of these running on a box. And then when one of them fails, our developers can run the test in NetBeans locally. It'll work exactly the same way, debug it, and then hopefully push a fix that fixes it. So it makes it very easy for us to have the test cycle running and actively maintained. Am I speaking too fast, or are you guys following it? Okay. No replies, so I assume I'm going too fast. Okay, so general options. NetBeans has a huge number of features, and I'm going to struggle to show you all of them, but I'm going to attempt to show you the coolest ones. So first of all, if you are using NetBeans, you have the ability, on the Mac it's under Preferences, on Windows I think it's under Tools Options. So if you don't like the way NetBeans works, you can go into it, you can go to the fonts, you can change the font style, you can change the font color, you can go to the key map. If you're coming from Eclipse or Emacs or anything else, you can change all the keyboard shortcuts. So if you're switching between IDEs, you can actually experiment from NetBeans without having to learn a whole new set of keyboard shortcuts. If there's one missing that you want to add, you can go in and find it. You can search them and see which ones they have. You can search in the shortcuts. All the shortcuts can actually have control characters. They all appear on the menus and they're all totally configurable. So that's keyboard shortcuts and coloring. You also have the ability to control very precisely how the code is generated and what NetBeans does. So say I'm in Java. The first thing my team always does, what are we on, is the default setting in NetBeans, number of spaces per indent is 4 lines, and the tab size is 8. So the first thing we do is we go to that and we set that to 4 and 4, which stops our code from looking different in everyone else's tool. So that's the first thing we do. And then what we can also do, and NetBeans won't sort out these arguments for you, but once you've had them, it will give you a consistent answer. So depending on where you like your braces. So if you like your braces on the top line, you can have your braces there. If you want your braces to be on the next line down, you can choose a new line, and that's moved down. So NetBeans allows you to totally configure how your if statements work, when your braces appear, how your line spacing is. And when you've finally got the correct way that everyone else should work, you can click on the export function and send them the settings so that they can make sure their code matches your standards. So that is the configuration options. One of the things I also like about NetBeans is it always adds sensible defaults. So when you run stuff, you'll see it adds them. And I'm going to do that in a second on the next slide. So let me just check. Okay, So let's dive into NetBeans and do some cool stuff. Okay, NetBeans is also trying to be your polite, helpful, not too bossy friend. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new class. Okay, and again, this is context sensitive. So if I'm in the Java source packages, it will offer me the chance to build a Java class. If I'm outside it, I'll get a different choice. If I was in an HTML project, I'd obviously get HTML. Okay, so new class. And again, NetBeans is politely reminding me that I should put it in not in a default package, but I should put it in a package somewhere. Obviously, I'm smarter than NetBeans, so I'm going to ignore its advice and carry on. So it's now created a class, and there's a template there, which again can be set within NetBeans, so I can have whatever I want, and it can insert dynamic values as well, so author, time, file, and so forth. Okay, now my favorite feature in NetBeans is the autocomplete, which is incredibly well hidden. If you press Control and space, it will bring up a menu. And this menu is context sensitive, and I can never remember how it's a public static main. So let's put it there, and you'll see NetBeans has put the cursor between the braces, and we're ready to go. So let's add a new. And again, let's press Control space, and we get auto completion. So new class, and this is all Control space. It's allowing me to complete it. A equals new class. And let's put a string inside it. Okay. And the first thing NetBeans does is it tells me that I don't have a constructor there. So it's now offering to create a constructor. Is it? Or have I got it? Yeah, double new. It's even smarter than me. It's spotted I've used two news. So now it's saying that I have that, and it's offering to create a constructor with a string. Okay. Sorry. And again, these are all context sensitive. So there we have it, and again, it's added a runtime exception there. So if I just left this code, it would tell me if I ever called my new class that there was a problem. So let's do something in that code. So if brackets a equals a brackets, and again, I press sys and press tab, and I get these options here. Okay. And it's also put the cursor in the right place for it. So val equals a. And the first thing that NetBeans has now spotted, of course, is that it's popped up a message there subtly reminding me that this is a string. So if I want to compare a string, that's not equals equals, that is actually dot equals. So thank you, NetBeans, for pointing out my error and saving me from some embarrassment. So NetBeans has this auto-completion functionality built in. I also want to do some code, and I don't want to type everything from scratch. So it would be really nice if I could just go into NetBeans and say, let's have a for loop, for example. And NetBeans would say, what for loop would you want? And you can see it offers me some abbreviations. So if I type FORE with a tab, it will insert that. And again, it puts the cursor in the right place to start it. And just to really show off, it would also be nice if NetBeans could also spot that I now have a int called I. Okay. And now that I've got an int called I might presumably at some point want a constructor to access it. So when I press Control space, not only does it tell me the constructors that exist within the code, but it says actually, here's a getter and setter if you want it on the I. And it's all set up and it will generate the code for me. So NetBeans is saving me an awful lot of time writing code. So I can concentrate on doing the really cool stuff. And so you've seen getters, setters, templates, catching silly mistakes. Okay, lastly, plugins. I told you NetBeans was highly modular. So if you go to NetBeans here, and if you find a feature is not available, if you go to plugins, you can normally download a plugin for it. Many of the plugins are actually available but not installed in NetBeans. So if you wanted CVS, because CVS isn't used much, it's there but it's not installed. So you can install them, you can install PMD, you can also remove things as well. So if you're using just Git, you can take out all of the other version controls. So you can trim NetBeans down to whatever you want. You can install the Android app. So you can end up with your own personalized, customized version of NetBeans set up exactly the way you want it. and you can download them as well. So that's the plugins. And what I lastly want to talk about on the NetBeans side is code quality. So we have tools. We can install PMD in order to access the code. We can also, there's a plugin. We can also run two things. If you go to Refactor, Inspect and Transform, NetBeans has a whole load of configurable user options. Like you can actually set it so that if you type a string equals equals, your code will throw a compiler error, or it will show a warning. And these are all configurable within here. So you can decide if you don't want braces set up or you want to make braces mandatory, that's really easy. And they can be set up, as I say, to warn or fail. And you can run those on the code. You can also upgrade the code. So if you have some Java 7 code, you can run the upgrade to Java 8, and it will show you all of the possible changes, all of the Lambda expressions you could introduce, and it will let you apply them or not. As well as doing that, if that wasn't enough, we also have the ability to inspect the code, which will run an even longer list of functions on the code and will come up with suggestions that NetBeans can't actually fix. It can also run find bugs, and it can run other language tests as well. So this list is much, much longer than the find and transform, because this is just finding bugs. It's not automatically fixing them. When it automatically fixes them, it always gives you the option of whether you want to apply it or not. So as you can see, NetBeans has some phenomenal capabilities in order to work on the code quality. And all that means, what all of this means together is that I spend less time writing less buggy code, and I look really good, which is what we want to achieve at the end of the day with NetBeans. So that's the end of my NetBeans talk. I'm going to squeeze in a quick talk now, then I'm on something else, and I'm hoping to give you questions. As I say, if you have any questions, I'm here for the rest of the conference. We have a stand. I've got 10 minutes, spot on. We have a stand, and if you have any questions on what I've talked about, if you want to know anything about medieval history, or you want to know anything about my next talk, please come and ask me. I'm here for your benefit all day. And I'm really loving NetBeans Istanbul, so I'm in a really good mood. So please ask me whatever you want. Okay, so let's move on to business of software. When I come to these conferences, I quite often get asked, how do I get a job working in computing, and what are my options? So in 10 minutes, I'm going to give you the business 101, as they call it. And again, I'm going to show more kitten pictures, so apologies for that. Okay, if you write code, that's a hobby. If you get paid to write code, that's a job. So for a lot of you, the big challenge is to work out how you can get someone else to pay you to do what you love. And my biggest achievement in life is I haven't worked a single day since 1999 when I set up my business. Because I do what I do now, I love all the time. So I haven't worked since then, but I've been very well paid for enjoying myself. So first of all, if you're going to be a coder, you need to know what your strengths and your weaknesses are. Hopefully you don't fall into the middle there. If you do, I would recommend you use Twitter. Just to give you some clues, you lot are talented, very young mostly. You get all of these new things. It's quite interesting, but I actually put this slide, when you go to a conference, you quite often find people whose talks were put together totally differently actually say the same things. And if you went to Gurjan's talk, you will be hearing some of this again. But we didn't actually confer on this. You're well educated. You are enthusiastic and hardworking. You remind me about me, actually, other than the young bit, obviously. You are cheap. That means cost effective. You are much, much cheaper than Americans to employ. And that's a big, important factor in the global market. You work well in a group. You get social media. You get networking. You get online. You understand going away and working. You're also in a perfect time zone. You're sitting in Turkey. You cross the time zone. Europe allows you to talk to the Far East and Silicon Valley on the same day. It is a fantastic place to be if you want to run a global business. There are lots of companies out there who want remote staff. They are looking for people overseas because it makes it much easier for them to provide support. If you look at companies like Basecamp, you look at IntelliJ, who develops IDEs, you look at Oracle, they all employ remote staff. And the trick there is to find the companies you want to work for and approach them, because they are looking for the smartest, brightest, most resourceful, most well-motivated. And the best way you can tell them that you fit in that category is to find them and let them know you exist. There are two types of jobs that you can get out there. The first one is that you are working for somebody else who may or may not be called Steve Jobs. And the second type is you're working for yourself. It's just you against the universe, up in a little corner. So I worked for a large company. That's where I learned my skills. And when you work for a large company, sometimes the money's better. They send you on lots of really cool courses and normally allow you to go and get drunk afterwards. They tend to have a clear structure to work your way through. They allow you to meet lots of people. So lots of my current customers are people I met who all went off to found their own companies as well. So we're sort of the class of 1999. We're all a bit grayer and older. It also looks good because people have heard of this and it makes you sound good if you work for a good company. Bad news is they have politics. You can't just code. You have to make sure the right people make the right decisions. And the one thing to remember on big companies is they no longer offer job security. Big companies can go bust just as easily as small companies. So never be sold on job security to a big company. When you work for a small company, they're far more flexible. They tend to be in fire control mode most of the time, so they need to be. They're less bureaucratic. You get real work done and you see what you're doing. They tend to be more driven, again, because they spend much more time putting out fires. You're also a much more integral part of the organization. There tend to be less opportunities in that if you're in a three-man company, there's two other people. It's not really, unless you grow the company, there isn't really options for promotion. And I'm afraid they still have politics. So I'd like to introduce you to this guy called Seth Godin. He's a famous blogger and he's on the internet. And one of the things he says is you have two choices in life. You can either wait in line and let somebody choose you, or you can go out and pick yourself and find something to do. So the other option I'm going to be talking about is startups and running your own business. So if you haven't heard of Seth, go and look him up. He is an outstanding expert. Startups is working for yourself. And the definition of a startup is it is a temporary organization searching for a repeatable and stable, scalable business. Sometimes that might be just the two of you. Sometimes that might be the next Google. Don't always assume every startup's trying to be the next Google. The odds of you being the next Google are 0. The odds of having a very successful company where you choose how you run the show and you live the dream are actually pretty good. If you create a startup, you want to create a startup because you have an idea, you want to be in charge, you don't like taking orders, you're passionate about something. If people avoid you at parties because you just talk about work all the time, that's a good sign. You will also learn how to change direction because your first idea will always be wrong. And even if it fails, it will give you so much knowledge and information. And don't get too obsessed about people stealing your idea, because if you have a really, really good idea, people won't steal it, they'll laugh at it. It's only when you go and say, actually, this is quite a good idea and I've got people paying for me, that is when people will steal your idea. So the best test of a really revolutionary idea is nobody takes it seriously. Okay, let's get on to the dirty words now. So we have money, and there are places you can get money. First of all, the 3 F's, which are friends, fools, and family. Secondly, you can get outside investment, so venture capitalists and angels. The bad news on venture capitalists is they aren't looking for successful companies. If you go and say, I've got this really cool idea for creating a 3-person company that's going to turn over $250,000 a year, they're not going to waste their time on you. They want unicorns, big companies they can sell for billions. So you can also self-fund and bootstrap, which means you raise the money yourself. And the really good news here is the costs of running a startup now are basically a laptop and a cup of coffee in Starbucks. So which one do you choose, whether you take money or not? Lots of upfront cost. You need to get there. Winner takes all, huge market, Clearbar. Go and ask people for lots of money. If it's cheap to start, established competitors, there's no advantage to being there, unclear, do it yourself. I'd just very quickly like to introduce you to these guys. On the left, you can see that guy's Patrick Foley. He used to be Azure evangelist at Microsoft. He now works for a 6-person company that sells software for designing granite tabletops. If you don't do granite tabletops, you buy someone else's product. This company, they have 12 people. They turn over $6 million a year. They found a really nice niche for themselves. The big companies don't go after their niche because to Microsoft, Oracle, 6 million's not a lot of money. But to a 12-person company, that's pretty good. And the guy on the right is startups, is Rob Walling. He spent the last 10 years creating companies, finding out what ideas work, following those ideas, experimenting them, and failing. And he's written it all up on his podcast. So those two guys, I would recommend you go and check out after I've spoken to you. I've met them all as well, and they're really nice guys as well. So I would like to finish by saying, find your place in the crowd, put a dent in the universe, and if you have any questions or you want to ask any questions about it, I have 5 minutes left. Thank you very much. Okay, first question.
Firstly, thank you for your presentation. And I would like to ask you that, are there any specific differences between the Eclipse and the NetBeans?
Between
Eclipse and the NetBeans.
there are huge differences. As much as anything, it's a question of philosophy. So Eclipse came from work that IBM was doing. So Eclipse was built in a certain way. And NetBeans was a student product that was developed in Czech Republic that has a different mindset. So to some extent, it's which philosophy you go for. I mean, I could spend hours telling you all the differences. But basically, all you need to know is that NetBeans is fantastic and Eclipse is rubbish. maybe you should be the guy to get this book, because you obviously need to be there. We are really, really lucky that we have all of these amazing tools. And generally speaking, we're arguing about the last 5%. So if Eclipse is right for you, use Eclipse. If NetBeans is right for you, use NetBeans. But try them all, because otherwise you might find you're missing out.
Can Firebug be configured to one developer while coding, without experience?
There is a special tool in NetBeans that allows you to connect into the browser. So you can install tools that allow you to debug the browser dynamically.
Sorry, I need Firebugs, not Firebug.
Sorry, your question was?
Can Firebug be configured to one developer while coding, not by clicking quick inspector?
You can run it in the editor, yes. Yeah. Would you like? Sorry. I won't tell the owner of the book they were the last choice. You had a question.
Is NetBeans compatible with other IDEs like Eclipse or IntelliJ? And can we import these projects into NetBeans without any problems?
NetBeans allows you to import Eclipse code. NetBeans is more compatible with Maven than just about any other tool. I can't tell you how compatible they are getting back the other way. NetBeans also allows you to use all of the Eclipse or IDEA shortcuts. So I would say NetBeans is highly compatible with all of the other tools. I'll answer questions till they drag me off. So in the middle at the back.
Does NetBeans support F#?
Come and ask Gurjan after the talk.
It does not, but it is free and open source, which means if something is missing, it is your responsibility to add it.
Right. At the very back, there was a question. Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Can you talk about NetBeans community?
The NetBeans community. So you have Oracle purchased NetBeans many years ago, and Oracle has some full-time developers. There is also a big group of people who use NetBeans because they regard NetBeans as a perfect solution. So I don't work for Oracle, I don't get paid by Oracle, but I still get involved in, there's a NetCat testing program where when NetBeans is going to be released, they allow us to test it first, which I join in because that means that I know that the next release of NetBeans does everything I need it to be. There's also been a whole load of NetBeans days that we've organised. So we've had little NetBeans community events. There was also NetBeans San Francisco. And we're hoping to do a NetBeans day in Istanbul next year. So if you're interested in getting involved, let me or Gurjan know. We'd be delighted to have you on board.
Does NetBeans provide support for profiling developers?
NetBeans has its own built-in profiler, which is really cool.
My question for your second part.
Yeah.
How can we prove ourselves to, as you said, there are many people looking for a job?
Well, the first thing you do is you find the company you want to work for, you contact them, and you explain clearly why you want to work for them. And that's one of the most impressive ways you impress a company. When you work in IT, there's a group of people who will try and send you CVs. Somebody who's gone out of their way to find a company, show how they're compatible, is clearly showing they are an order of magnitude better than anyone else. So that would be what I would do first. Okay. Yeah. Because I get all of the functionality such as auto completion, code completion, all built in for free, I can write code faster in NetBeans than I can write it on command line. Okay. So, it's an open source product. It's already on the internet. You can download the source code. The attraction of NetBeans is the things I learn in Java, I can then take those skills to HTML5, and I can take them to JavaScript. Okay. If you have any more questions, I'd be delighted to answer them on our stand. Thank you very much.